What's up, rockers? Welcome to another episode of the Talk Louder podcast, where we geek out on all things rock and roll. Hit that subscribe button on our YouTube channel. Leave us your likes and comments. You can also leave likes and comments on our Facebook page. Follow us on iTunes, Spotify, Instagram at talklouder_podcast, and our website, talklouderpodcast.com, where you can find links to our merch and all of our previous episodes. I'm Metal Dave Glessner, along with my co-host, Jason McMaster. And today we're joined by a friend of ours of many, many years. And it just so happens that he's in one of the biggest metal hard rock bands of the last, I'd say, 20 years. I think that's safe to say.
Oh, yeah.
We've got John Moyer from Disturbed with us today. And John's a great guy, a really interesting career. He has had a lot of great opportunities. He's worked very hard to earn those opportunities. We talk a lot about that today. You'll find out he's a great storyteller. He's very high energy, has a lot of enthusiasm for what he does. And I think that always makes for great relationships in whatever industry you're in. And in John's case, it's also made for a catalog of some great music and some great memories. So
I got two things about John that I really love. He's a good dude.
Yeah.
He's a really good dude. The other thing is he's obviously a great bass player.
Yeah. Yeah.
The third thing is he cares. I guess that goes with good dude.
Yeah. Yeah.
He cares about whatever job he's got his head wrapped up, whatever he's completely focused on, he's going to do a great job. He's going to inspire. He's going to have a great time. He's going to make sure you have a great time. And he's there to learn just as much. So
yeah. He's best known for being the bass player in Disturbed, but many of us here in Texas and around the world remember him from the Union Underground. They were signed to a major label.
He replaced me.
Yeah, replaced you in the Union Underground. Yeah.
Which feels weird to say, but I was standing in his shoes that he didn't know were his shoes.
Right.
For 2 years. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the Union Underground signed to a major, and they toured with Ozfest, and they toured with Marilyn Manson. And fun fact, when Union Underground was getting started, they did a whole tour, and the opening band was Linkin Park. Mm-hmm. So Union Underground achieved quite a bit in their short time. Then John moved on to Disturbed, and we're going to talk about some of his other things that he's been involved in. He played in a band called Art of Anarchy that had Scott Weiland from Stone Temple Pilots on vocals. They also had Scott Stapp from Creed on vocals on a second album. John was also in a band called Adrenaline Mob with Mike Portnoy on drums. I should mention Bumblefoot was in Art of Anarchy on guitar. Shredder from spent some time in Guns N' Roses. And also with Jeff Tate from Jeff Tate's version of Queensryche, and which segued into his version being called Operation Mindcrime. John was the bass player in that band as well. So obviously a very storied career, a lot of great chapters. We touch.
And that's not all. But wait, there's more.
There's more.
So I feel for you that you have to write the description for this episode and include all of the badassery that you just used in this intro here.
Yeah, my description is going to be a paragraph, but yeah, a lot of accomplishments and a lot of great energy, and just a good dude, like Jason said. We're happy to have him today, John Moyer, on the Talk Louder podcast.
Nice.
Yeah. So thanks for joining us, man. It's good to see you.
I see one of my pictures is crooked. It's going to drive me crazy if I don't fix it right now. How are you guys doing?
Yeah, good. Fix that shit. You need a ladder. Oh, look, it's professional.
Oh. That's better.
Interior decorating with John Moyer today on the Talk Louder podcast.
It is better. It is better.
Yeah.
Still a little off, but that's okay. You guys see, look at this wall.
Nice.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a high ceiling.
That is a high. Did you paint that?
Yeah, I sure did. I do all my own housework for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Those are the gold and platinum records from Disturbed over the years.
Nice. That's quite a trophy case. These are my high school posters from through the years. Not as impressive, I guess. Yeah.
No, I love it. You got the collection.
And this is a bunch of crap that I refuse to throw away.
Right.
I think if we had a garage sale, John's collection might sell for a little more than ours.
But mine would only sell to one fan. Like mine's just Disturbed stuff, or the bands I've been in. You got stuff from all kinds of different bands.
Yeah, like Planet of the Apes, and whatever. I got a Merciful Fate plaque that a buddy of mine sent. See that Don't Break the Oath plaque up there?
Did you get that from Bobby?
It's right here. I got it from a guy named Bob. I got it from Bob. No, that's not true. I got it from.
Better get it right.
Yeah, I just fucked up, didn't I?
We did a whole episode on that plaque.
God damn it! It's gonna kill me.
Edit. Mayday.
No, I'll get it right.
Can you hear me okay? Is it okay?
Yeah, you look great.
Yeah, we can hear you just fine and see you just fine, especially after you clean that lens with your shirt.
I would like to thank Mike Board for giving.
Mike Board, there we go.
Mike Board sent me that. Mm-hmm.
So John, thanks for joining us, man. We've been
thanks for having me.
We've tried to get you a couple times. You're a busy guy, obviously, but we're happy to have you today. I can't believe it's been 2 weeks since you were over at my house. John and I both have teenage sons, and we've been trying for the longest time to get them together to jam because they're both musically inclined. And we finally made that happen.
Rock stars in the making.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And that sort of reignited this whole idea of let's get you on the podcast. So thanks for joining us, man.
I learned something from the video that was shared.
What?
That every girl's crazy about a sharp dressed man.
Yeah, that was the tune the boys were playing.
Well, and then when we left the room, they went into System of a Down and much heavier stuff. They let us old men do some old man rock with them, and then when we left, they got heavy.
Yeah.
Well, what's cool is when they're old men, that same kind of thing is going to happen.
True.
But in my opinion, System of a Down is not really new. Did I just hang myself?
They're not. But
They're not.
Great. Kids today are getting into it. Honestly, I think so let's talk about music here for a second.
Oh, that's what this is about. Yeah.
One of the great things, in my opinion, about metal, more so than even rock, is that it stands the test of time. It has longevity. There's always a new group of teenage boys in particular who discover it. Like my son or me, for example, I got into Black Sabbath, way after they were a big band. Ozzy was already on his own, and I was getting into Black Sabbath. And now my son's getting into System of a Down, and those records are 20 years old.
Yeah.
So there's something to be said. And now my son gets into Sabbath. I've been playing him, We Sold Our Soul for Rock and Roll and the old stuff. And we have Metallica Mondays, and we listen to, we have a commute to his school. So when we're in the car, it's music time. Yeah. And he gets an education from me. He knows all about the grunge era. He loves Alice in Chains. He knows a bunch of Metallica. We get into System of a Down. Oh, recently I turned him on to The Real Thing by Faith No More. That record in particular, which there's an argument to be said that was the start of new metal. Like didn't really exist until that record blew up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard that argument. That's fair. That's fair. I remember when that came out, and it was
how do you think Korn fits into the beginning of new metal?
I mean, pioneers.
Their first record, the first Korn record, like you might as well have just put your head in a meat grinder, because I hadn't up to that point I hadn't really heard anything like that. I wouldn't have even at that point called it funk metal, even though it had all the slappity bass stuff. It was fucking brutal.
Yeah.
And the vocals were brutal. It was almost like, I don't know, screamo and death metal and funk, and it didn't remind me of Faith No More at all, but I think Faith No More had luck with the mainstream, whether they were even looking for it at all.
And they weren't. I mean, it
Probably
doesn't seem
not.
like it. You know, it's just kind of. But that record's so good. I listen to it now, and I still just fan of it.
I could say, and I'm sorry to interrupt. I could say the same thing about Korn too, that I just said about Faith No More. They weren't looking for it, and they were probably in their minds writing the most fucked up shit they could think of, and then look what happened.
Yeah. I heard an argument that I thought was interesting because I never heard it before. When I think of nu metal, I think the sort of the forefathers are Korn, Faith No More, bands that we were talking about. But somebody made the point that you could also say the Sepultura album Roots was sort of the beginning. I never thought of that, but then I listened to it and I was like, oh, I kind of get that. I can see that, you know?
It's hard to really define nu metal. I mean, people kind of want to go, well, it's rap rock, but it's not. It's more than that. It's less than that. You know, Limp Bizkit's probably nu metal. They're probably like the and then it was like, well, if it doesn't have DJs and doesn't rap, it's not nu metal, but that's not true. Because like we said, Korn and Faith No More, you know, it's I don't know how to describe what nu metal is like to somebody who has never heard it. But then I know I could play them like 4 records and they'd be like, oh, I get it.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, your band gets lumped in that category all the time, Disturbed.
First record for sure. That first record for sure. And then I think Disturbed kind of turned the corner into a more hard rock band. But we still have songs off every record that, you know, that you can hear go back to our first record, The Sickness, and kind of have that thing. I think now, I don't know, you just write what you write. So, you know, that was a moment in time, that first record. And then now the band seems to be more, writing kind of like harder edged, heavier stuff, less. Nu metal's kind of quirky, right?
Yeah, it's got a lot of disparate, what used to be considered disparate elements all kind of thrown together. Now that it's been thrown together for 25, 30 years, it's become sort of its own identity. But yeah, there's a lot more to it than just your standard drums, bass, guitar.
I think you're right. That's a good way to put it. Disparate pieces that get put together and then it creates that unique sound. That's probably the best way I've ever heard it described.
Well, that makes me like the term nu metal a little better because I really do not like the term nu metal, and it's as bad as hair metal because you're taking these elements that don't really matter at all. Do I like it? Yes. Do I like it? No. Do I like it? Yes. It's fairly black and white for me personally. I'm just letting it rip. I don't want to bite my tongue. So there's a lot of stuff that's under the umbrella of nu metal or whatever, even Disturbed or Avenged Sevenfold and just run from all that. I'm not a fan of Limp Bizkit. I understand it, but there's more to what I feel like my heart wants to fall in love with, and it's just everything goes back to rock and roll. And I think Disturbed, not kissing ass here, has a little more rock, especially now, has a little more rock and roll in it than, like you said, your first album, which I think really fits what Dave just described. And that's enough to start running with whatever the fuck it is we're talking about.
I think it's a generational thing too. Like you look at bands, like the bands that we're considering nu metal, your Korns, your Limp Bizkits, Disturbed, and you go back and you look at their influences. A lot of times those guys are from a generation after me and Jason, not so much John, but me and Jason grew up when metal was defined by things like Iron Maiden and Judas Priest. And a lot of the nu metal bands, I think, when they were teenagers, their record collection, they grew up on Pantera and Ministry and stuff like that.
Yes, we did.
Let's hope that's the truth all the way around.
I think it is, though, because I read all the rock magazines and stuff, and you'll see an interview. I'll just throw a name out there, like from a guy from the Deftones, and he talks about when he was a kid, he bought And Justice for All, and it changed his life. I'm like, And Justice for All? I remember when Kill 'Em All was like the groundbreaking new album because I was still hung up on Iron Maiden, and his starting point is In Justice for All or Vulgar Display of Power or something. That's their starting point. So I think that sort of influences what became known as nu metal, for lack of a better term.
I could see
I
that.
like it. I like it.
I know for myself, Iron Maiden, I definitely appreciate. I know their music. I played tons of their songs over the years, but it's really not what I grew up on. They had kind of had come up, and then and so for me, when I was still in high school, that's when Pantera came out with their Cowboys from Hell, and then the second record, which was a #1 hit at Billboard, which blew everybody away, Vulgar Display of Power. When that hit, it was like, it was crazy because we all loved Pantera. But we had no idea it was going to be a #1 record. It turned out to be #1 record.
The #1 record was Far Beyond Driven.
Far Beyond Driven. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. My bad. And when that record came out, we all lost our minds. We're just like, this is so cool that it was like a validation, And
Sure.
then, so I grew up during I would say I was end of Master of Puppets. You can almost define your musical career by what Metallica record you were listening to as a teenager, right? So for me, it's like, And Justice for All came out. I was really into one, and then I was about to graduate high school when the Black Album came out, and that was a big influence. And then of course Master of Puppets is great, but then, and Jason, you can attest to this, when I had my rock school and I was teaching kids, some kids would come in, they'd be like, I love Metallica, and I'm like, oh yeah, me too, Master of Puppets, and they're like, no, Fuel, Load and Reload. Yeah. And it was like, and it really opened my eyes. So it's like, wow, they're Metallica fans because of the newer songs that, the newer generation for them of what they were listening to. And I find that happens with Disturbed too. We'll meet, fans, and they're like, I listened to your stuff in high school. And I'm like, and they're like, I love Indestructible. A lot of our fans love Indestructible. And then our older fans, grew up on the first record, and that's the record they love. It really depends. And if you're an artist like a Metallica or a Kiss or an Iron Maiden or a Black Sabbath that keeps putting out records throughout the years, and then you start to realize a lot of your fans are defined not necessarily by like a one record thing. And that's what I was saying about hard rock and metal in general, is that new fans keep popping up, and then they'll support whatever new thing you're doing, and then that'll be their favorite thing. And so I definitely, I noticed it with Metallica when I was teaching at my school, and now that Disturbed has 7, 8 records out, when I talk to fans, it's all over the board, but it always comes down to whatever we put out when they were in high school. It's like their favorite shit.
I think that's fair. Yeah.
You said something very interesting when you mentioned rock school or school of rock, or it doesn't matter what company it is, just kids taking lessons from an older rock person. Oh, I love Metallica. Me too. I love that story, by the way. But when they say Fuel, I stop right there and I go, wow, I bet I'm as old as your grandparents.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? That puts it in perspective too, because that means that somebody, an older brother, dad, mom, either listens to, alternative radio, which Metallica, that's how a lot of people discovered Metallica, was on alternative hard rock, loud rock, as Billboard would call it sometimes. Because that could be Nickelback, it could be Metallica, it could be White Zombie, loud rock, right? Limp Bizkit, a lot of the bands we've been talking about, era specific, Fuel specific, early 2000s, whatever.
I agree.
So if their parents are a certain age and if they downloaded it, if they have the record or whatever, that's what is around the house all the time. So little Johnny is going to be in Fuel. And not to go down a Metallica rabbit hole, but we were just talking about that. Metallica on those Load, Reload, My Load, Your Load records, those records, they're rediscovering themselves as a rock and roll band. Metallica is.
Yeah.
Fuel is like, it's a rock and roll song. Those are rock and roll records. I don't know if there's anything on those records that really even borrows like they kind of do now. They're influencing themselves by just remembering, whoa, how did that riff go again? And, playing the first 3 records in the set for going on 50 years now.
Yeah.
So when you think
I respect that so much. I think
me too.
I think you should give the fans what they want. But at the same time, you do need to evolve. There's a fine line. Like they say, fans, they get mad because a band puts out a record that doesn't sound like the last record, but then they get mad if they put out the same record.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, but I think there's a happy middle ground. And, there's bands who get stuck doing the same thing year after year, and it becomes stale. AC/DC is not one of those bands, go figure. But even though they have definitely, a similar formula, but most bands, I think that stand the test of time, they know enough, or it's in them to put out the music that their fans love, but also to push the boundaries and do something new and offer something fresh. And sometimes
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Do you feel like Disturbed is definitely one of those bands, and you guys look forward to writing and creating something a little bit special? I'll just say, I don't want to say overtly incredibly different than the last record, but something
absolutely
something special.
That is our mantra. Absolutely. Yeah. Is do what works for us, but also do something new, push ourselves. Let's get uncomfortable. If you think about it, the first two records didn't even have a guitar solo on it. That was the first record was sort of a new metal thing. Second record was a little more layered, a little more guitar heavy, but still no guitar solos. Yep. Third record, Dan starts wailing, and people are like, we didn't even know this guy was a shredder, and then we start going into these, guitar solo things. And then fourth record, kind of a combination of things. Fifth record, we got really heavy. Let's see how heavy we can get. Asylum's our heaviest record. I love that record. It's just pummeling. Listen to that record and you're ready to beat somebody up. I love it. And then we took a break and we came out with Immortalized. Immortalized then had Sound of Silence. So obviously we're kind of like going in a new direction here. And then that opened up a lot of doors for us. So the next record after Sound of Silence, we called Evolution, because it was us really embracing new ideas and new ways to do it. And so I think Evolution to me is probably our most controversial record, because a record's 10 songs deep, right? And I think 4 or 5 of the songs off Evolution are either acoustic or are ballads. Half the record is ballads. And there's some great bangers on Evolution. Just like, Are You Ready? I think's off that record, and a couple other just really powerful songs. But then we've got A Reason to Fight. We've got Hold On to Memories. Hold On to Memories. When I went to a wedding venue and they played it on the speaker, and it wasn't because I was there. It's like part of the rotation, And so like that was a chance after Sound of Silence. We were like, let's take this chance to really see what we can do. And so that record, called it Evolution on purpose to show people, we're not just gonna put out the same old. So some fans loved it, some fans hated it. But nonetheless, it's like you can't please everybody. You just got to do what's in your heart. And I think you have to grow musically, or you get stale. Yeah. So then after Evolution, we've got the new record out, Divisive, and Divisive is powerful. It's pummeling. The new single Bad Man is one of the heaviest songs, if not the heaviest song that we've ever put out. So, now we're kind of at that point, maybe we're like where Metallica's at, where they're like, well, what have we done? And what haven't we done? And what do we like to do? Okay, this next record, let's pull from here, let's pull from here, let's pull from here, let's put it together, and then, move forward with it. So hopefully we're following in those Metallica steps.
Well, what's fantastic is that you're in a position to where you can do that. You can take some chances and be different. You have a loyal enough following. You guys have done very well for yourselves since day one, and it's been probably a little bit of up and down as far as where the almighty dollar is flowing, but you guys are still lucky enough or blessed enough to be in a position to be able to challenge yourselves and still have the following chomping at the bit to hear a new song from you guys' intellectual third eye.
I think also it helps that David, our singer, is so versatile.
Of course.
He's got a lot in his bag of tricks.
Yeah.
There's some singers, God bless them, they're one-trick ponies. They got their one thing, they do it well. I am the one, the gun, Zombie does Zombie well, but that's going to be Zombie all the way. You're not going to hear him sing a beautiful ballad. You're not going to hear him doing a baritone. David's comfortable rat-a-tat-tat-tat-tat. And then he's comfortable also singing, big open notes. So that's, having that kind of range in your singer allows Dan, our guitar player who does, he does most of the songwriting with David. They're like the Lennon McCartney of metal is what I call them, because they just have such a great connection. And it's just the two of them, man. And they've worked together for so long, and they just keep pushing each other, and then like as soon as David shows another little trick he has, Dan goes, "Ha, gotcha," and he writes something into it, So they're a great team, but it's that versatility that Dave has that allows a lot of what we're able to do.
I correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like I read something one time that said that Disturbed was on a streak of 5 consecutive, and I might have the number wrong, but I think it was at least 5 consecutive multi-platinum albums. And the only other bands that could claim to have done that was Metallica, Van Halen, the Dave Matthews Band, and U2. And I thought that just stopped me in my tracks, because I was like, man, that's some pretty elite company. But if I look at your numbers, they seem to bear that out. Does that ring any bells with you?
It's 5 number one records in a row. So after the first record, which is when we say number one record, we mean number one when it came out that week.
Shipped.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Because
it ships as a number one record.
Yeah, it's hard to build up to a number one because when Disturbed started, nobody knew who the band was, so it didn't ship number one. It took a while, even though that's our best selling record. It never hit number one that week at Billboard.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like you have to have some kind of single that blows up, or you have to be an established band that has the fan base, like Pantera did, when they put out their second record. So for us, we had 5 in a row: Believe, Indestructible, 10,000 Fists, Asylum, and I think Immortalized. So 5 in a row that week, number one records when they came out. That's a testament to the fan base, honestly.
Industry anticipation.
Right. So there's only a few bands that had that. So there's a couple reasons that happened. One of them was obviously fans who just love the band, who are voracious. Also, you can't wait too long between records if you're going to get that kind of in a row. If you wait too long, that next record might not do as good and takes a little while to heat up, or some of your fans leave and you don't have that pop. So we were working hard. We would tour for a year and a half, and we would make a record for a year, and tour a year and a half and make, or less than a year. So we were putting out a record every 2 years, which is a lot. When you're talking like 4 records in a row, bam, 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 bam.
Yeah.
So that's a part of the reason, we just kept that momentum going. But yeah, it was Metallica, Dave Matthews Band, System of a Down.
Oh, okay.
And us, and I think there's another band. I don't think it's U2 though.
Okay, I could have been wrong. I felt like I had most. It's
a weird stat.
Yeah, it's a really weird stat, but it's a very impressive stat, because when I saw Disturbed in lumped in with those other names that, again, I consider, this is me being old again, but when I think of best-selling artists, Metallica. Dave Matthews Band isn't that old. So anyway, I just know that those bands that you're in the company of sell a lot of friggin' records. And for you guys to be in that same company was pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Tell us about, so you're not an original member of Disturbed, but and when you were over here the other day, you were telling me the story. I always like the story about your audition, because you were known in the industry, so you had a bit of a name, and you could have kind of maybe pulled some strings and tried to put yourself in an advantageous position to get that gig. But you kind of did it the old school way, the pound in the pavement way. I want you to tell our listeners about your audition for the gig and how you ultimately got there, because you told me that the band was a little leery of you at first.
Well, so before Disturbed, I was in the band, the Union Underground.
Mm-hmm.
Jason, Union Underground. You filled in for them a few times and helped them out back in the day.
I was in the band
friends with Patrick Kennison.
Yeah, 2 years I was in the band, and I had to quit because I wanted to write my own. I was right on you know, across the street. I'm in my own bands and writing my own songs.
Right.
So I had to split, and it's a story on my side, and then you just take it is Brian and them were like, so you sure about this? Because you know, I showcased with them and everything. And they were like, man, are you sure about this? Well, okay, well, who in Austin plays bass, uses pedals, and plays with a pick and could sing a little bit? And I said, John Moyer. I didn't even hesitate. And I thought that your band at the time, Soak, was sort of not on the concert. Yeah, just kind of.
We're on the back end of our run.
Just kind of hanging around. The timing
of it worked out good. So I got the Union Underground gig in that band for 4 or 5 years. Yeah. And then we broke up in October of 2003. And then in November of 2003, Disturbed announced on the radio that they were parting ways with their bass player, Fuzz, right? So I was like, you know, let's see if I can make this work. So I did pull every string I had, Dave. I had Mikey, the drummer's number, and Dan's number. So I left them messages and I said, hey man, you know, you lost your bass player. I lost my band. If you guys need somebody temporarily, or you're looking for someone permanent, please keep me in mind, you know. And, you know, they were being flooded with calls from all kinds of dudes, you know, as soon as that announcement came out. So I suffice to say, I never really got an answer back from that. And then I knew some people in management, you know, from the Soak years and Union Underground days. And so Paul Nugent, who managed Soak, he knew the management company for Disturbed. So he put in a good word for me. Didn't really hear anything back. And then Disturbed in December said, you know, if you want to join our band, send us a CD with your music and a profile and a bio and all this. I put together the whole thing, you know. I Turn Me On Mr. Deadman, which is a #1 rock radio hit, as well as Soak song, which had done really well for us. It was in American Row from Paris. And
Caroline? Was that Caroline?
That was another one, Shuttergut. Yeah. And then Caroline, was really what we should have called it, because that's what fans call it anyway. Yeah. But
right.
Soak was notorious for misnaming our songs. But I even put together like a picture disc. It had me on the front looking all badass, big old black cowboy hat, you know, just the whole thing. And once again, I didn't hear back. So January and February of 2004 come around, and I'm hearing through the grapevine that they're auditioning people, private auditions. They're bringing in people. And I'm not going to name any names, but, you know, I made some calls and I'm like, hey, man, I heard you auditioned. Yeah, man, I don't think I'm going to get the gig, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay. I was like, did they mention me or you hear anything? I'm like, no, man, you know, I don't think you're going to get the gig. And I just kind of kept hearing that. Like, they knew I was interested, but, you know, Union Underground was kind of hell on wheels. And I think, I don't know. I think that there was an idea of who I was that they just kind of were turned off by. So, all right, whatever. But I wasn't going to give up until I got in front of them. So like January, February, March rolls around and they still haven't found a bass player. And even somebody through their label, I knew the secretary of their A&R guy, and he went and put in a good word for me. Still like nothing, you know. Wow. So then they held an open audition first week of April. Last week of March, first week of April in 2004. So this is like, so October, I'm out of Union Underground. They announced departure of Fuzz in November. December, January, February, late March, they held open audition in LA. And then early April, they held an open audition in Chicago. So 2 of them. And the auditions are 2 weeks apart or a week apart, whatever. So I go to the second audition. And I was pretty broke at the time. You know, it was Union Underground wasn't working. I was trying to work a day job. You know, I was married at the time to my ex. You know, we had a daughter together. So it's like a balancing act. It's like, is it time for me to hang up the spurs and, you know, start, you know, being a responsible adult, or am I a lifer? Am I going to do this? Am I going to keep pursuing this? You know, of course I'm going to keep pursuing it. That's just in me. So We scrapped together what money we could, bought a plane ticket. I didn't even have enough. I had barely enough to even stay in a hotel room. I get to Chicago. I'm carrying my bass with me. I hitched a ride to South Chicago. How dangerous that was, because I couldn't afford a cab. Somebody gave me a ride to South Chicago. I get down there. I check into a Motel 6, which is around the corner from the club where they were holding the auditions. They're holding auditions at a club called the Oasis. It's not around anymore, but Oasis was a badass Chicago nightclub back in the day, rock club. And I get up that morning to go to the audition. And once again, I have no idea how I'm going to get there. And I walk out and I see some dudes walk out of another hotel room, and they're rockers. And I just can tell. I'm like, hey, you guys here for the Disturbed audition? They're like, yeah, man. I'm like, awesome. Can I hitch a ride? They're like, yeah, sure. So I hitched a ride even to the audition from the hotel. These guys are cool dudes. We're just, shooting the shit. But during all this time, I'm not telling anybody I was in Union Underground. I'm not like putting that forward. If I'm going to fly to Chicago, if I'm going to stand in line, I'm going to do it like for real. I'm going to show these guys I'm willing to do anything that they want to get in this band.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to want any special treatment. I want to be judged on the same level as every single guy that walks in that door. Okay. Yeah. So I get there. There's already a line around the corner. By the time I get in line, I'm like number 68, 67 in line. And the line just keeps going after me. By noon, there was 300 people in line. Right. And they got people coming in, and there's so many people in line. They're just like letting people play for 30 seconds, boom, boom, boom. And you had to learn 3 songs. They were going to tell you which song it was when you were at the door. Right. So by the time I start, so now I'm outside. Now I'm in the club, and there's still a line in the club to go to like the private showcase room within the club. About this time, someone recognizes me from Union Underground. And some dude's like, oh, dude, I saw you on Ozfest, blah, blah, blah. And I'm taking some pictures and stuff like that. I'm like, okay, cool. It's just like, no big deal. And there was some great bass players in line. Like the guy in front of me had fingers for hammers. The dude behind me was the touring bass player for Boston. I mean, these were some great players. Anyways, I get up to the front of the line. They tell me my song that I'm going to do. I walk in, and the guys are sitting there kind of like American Idol style, right? They're just like in chairs with management, with clipboards, which is kind of funny because like I've auditioned people, and you either know they're right or you don't. Like you don't really need a clipboard, but maybe they were like taking notes on people. Maybe it was getting down to that. They're having a hard time finding somebody, so they're just like doing whatever was needed. So they're sitting there. I walk in. David Draymond, our singer, sees me, and he says, "John, what are you doing here?" And I go, man, I'm here for the same reason all these other guys are here. And then he says, sorry to hear about Union Underground. And I said, not me. That was my past. I'm here for my future. That's perfect. It was like exactly what I wanted to express to them. I wanted to show them, that you can't say no to me unless you tell me in person. And I'm not going to give up, first of all. And secondly, I'm not carrying any baggage with me. This is me, blank slate, moving forward for you guys. So I get on stage. I play my little 30 seconds of The Game was the song that I played, which is off the first record. As soon as I was done, man, my heart was just racing. I never even get nervous for a gig. I played in front of, even before Disturbed, I've played in front of massive crowds and never gotten this nervous. And Jason, you can attest to this. It's harder to play for less people than it is for more people.
I've never auditioned for that reason. I've never auditioned.
You would have to, bro.
To death to do that, man.
So I said, I put my bass in the case. Like as soon as the song's over, I just put my bass in the case. I shut it. And I go, hey, thanks a lot, guys. You guys got so many people out here who are lined up. They're so thankful to even have this opportunity. This is a really cool thing you guys are doing. I'm going to get out of your hair so you guys can continue, your day. And I just raced out. I didn't go, so what do you think? Should we send everybody home?
Right.
Because obviously, I wasn't that way at all. I was like respectful of the process of the other people who were there. I grabbed my bass, I locked it, and I just walked out the door. I mean, I already knew where the exit was before I even finished the song. And like, I'm in the middle of the song planning my exit. I'm like, leave them wanting more, pack that bass and get the fuck out. That's exactly what I did, And so I'm in the parking lot and their manager rushes after me, Jeff Tate, and he's got this thick Chicago accent. Hey, yo, John, what's up? Bro? Where are you going? Where are you going so fast? I'm like, I don't know, audition's over. He's like, well, the guys, they like you. They want you to come back tomorrow and, audition with them in person, play in person. I'm like, okay, cool. My flight was the next day, and I'm like, so I have a flight tomorrow. I'm kind of fishing, can you pay for my flight or something?
Right.
He looks at me and he goes, you want the gig or not? I do want the gig. So I went home, and this was April 3rd. April 4th was my anniversary at the time. I was supposed to be home. Called up my wife. She was very supportive at the time. I go, honey, happy anniversary. I'm not going to make it home. And she understood. We changed the plane ticket, put it on whatever credit cards we had or borrowed whatever money we had to make it work. I don't even know how we made it work back then. And I stayed the next day. I showed up. There were 5 people there. None of them were from, there was like one guy from the callback from LA, one guy from the callback. Well, I was the callback from Chicago, the only one. And then they had a couple other dudes who were kind of friends, who they were kind of in the running. And there was like 5 of us throughout the day that they ended up playing with the band. And one thing led to another, and I got the gig.
Wow. That's such a great story. I love
you made the top 5.
Yeah. So what I took out of that whole story was Union Underground had such a reputation as being hellraisers that they didn't want to touch you with a 10-foot pole because they thought you were a liability, or what?
I mean, let's not get too specific about that.
Right.
Okay, fair enough.
We were all young. We were all a little crazy. Union guys in particular. I'll tell you right now, there had been a run-in between, the singers had like a little issue. And, when you're in a band, that's your gang. So, if my singer has an issue with your singer, well, I'm backing my singer.
Okay.
So not that was like a thing, but, that's just kind of how it was. So it wasn't like, we got into a fight or anything, but it got a little tense between the 2 singers, which was unfortunate because Disturbed was on the rise and Union Underground could have used Disturbed's help. And Disturbed was, I found out later that they were considering taking us out. And then that little altercation made David go, I don't want those guys out on the road with us. Wow. And I just got lumped in with that whole scenario.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have to say real quick. I'm sorry, Dave.
No, go ahead.
That John, when you told me that story years ago now, I can't, just pretty close to right after you got it, I guess, because Broken Teeth came through Chicago. You drove out to Schaumburg and saw us.
Yep. Yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah. But the story has not changed one iota. The story about you, scraping to get to Chicago to do that, even the verbiage and your communicado between them. I don't remember the management, hey, John, where you going? I don't remember that part of it, but that's my new favorite part. But the story hadn't changed a bit. And I just want to say that, it's not a surprise that you got the gig because you've always been stand up and straight. So
thanks, pal.
Yeah, of course.
That. I like to say, don't let the truth get in the way of a good story, but that story doesn't need any embellishment. It tells itself.
Yeah.
I mean, the deeper I go into the specifics of it, the more mind blowing it gets.
Yeah, that's why I wanted you to repeat it for the benefit of our listeners, because I've heard the story. That's probably now the 3rd or 4th time you've told it to me. But it just like Jason says, it's such a great story. And if nothing else, not only is it sort of a rocky sort of success story, but it really illustrates your perseverance to do what it takes to give this your best shot. Credit cards and anniversaries and everything else.
Yeah, notwithstanding. Hey, man, you know what? What we do for music and rock, there's a lot of sacrifice. And whether we're successful or not, we kind of have to do it. Whether, you're a fan and you're going to be a journalist about it, or whether you're going to perform. It's not an easy road. There's no, you don't go to college and get placed. There's not like a placement program for it. Like I'm not going to go to school and get a bass degree and they're going to be like, Microsoft's going to hire you. They've got a bass division in Seattle. Right. And that just doesn't fucking exist, Right. And here's the other thing too. You could be great and never make it.
Oh yeah.
There's no there's no wherewithal. Like, you know, it's about connection with fans. It's about striking something in people's hearts. I'm not like the greatest bass player. Like, you know, I can't shred. I watch guys on YouTube sometimes. I'm like, God damn, that guy's good.
Yeah.
You know, and it's inspiring to me. But at the same time, as good as that guy is or whatever, I wish him all the luck in the world. But that's not really what I got into music for. I like playing bass. I like being good, but I like music because I like songs. I like connecting to your heart. I like lyrics. I like melody. I like the sound of you know, the guitars and the pounding rhythms and the complexity that goes with that. And I like bands. I like the interplay that happens when more than one person creates something. And there's that energy that a group has on stage. That to me just gets me going. I mean, I can be at a rock show and just start like shedding a tear because I just feel it so powerful. Yeah. So that's why I got into it. I think that's the reason most people like music.
Yeah.
And you know, so but trying to manufacture that is difficult. Right. and trying to find success within that.
And if you can manufacture it, it's almost sort of, it's manufactured. It's not as heartfelt or organic or whatever. So you might still have success at it, but you're not feeling the same emotional return as someone who gets into it for the reasons that you just expressed.
Well, he's John's a lifer. He's a fan, and you're practicing your strengths, not your speed at scales.
Yeah, for sure.
You're using your story. You mentioned this, and this is very important. We're talking about just because you're good, you're not going to, doesn't mean you're going to make it or go anywhere past the camera on your YouTube channel. You could be the greatest. You could be the GOAT, and no one would care other than, gee, look at this guy on YouTube. What's for dinner? But the effect that you have is because of the heart that you have. But what I was going to say about your story is, this is important to me. You mentioned you're using your resources. You don't have any money, but you're trying, you're calling the secretary that works for the label guy, and you're making sure that you can, tug the right string and go, excuse me, yeah, sorry to bother you, but would like to try to find out what's, so I could, because you're trying to throw your name in the hat until you're standing in front of them.
Absolutely.
And you made it happen because you were using your resources. It wasn't just like, oh, I'm so-and-so and I'm just going to walk in and or I'm sorry, I'm so-and-so, I'm just going to make a phone call and get the gig. That was never in your vocabulary at all. You were the whole time doing the work, making a phone call. Oh, they need a press kit. No problem. Blah, da, 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 black cowboy hat, blah, 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 blah. You did everything. So those little baby steps, you did every one of them until you were like, thank you for your time, gentlemen. I'll see you tomorrow, which resulted in, hey, John, where you going, buddy? So, yep. Boom. Yeah.
How long have you been in Disturbed now?
19 years coming up.
Okay. Holy shit.
Yeah. It comes down to this, Jason. It's respect. I respected what they built. I respected who they were, and if you're going to if you're going to want to join something like that, you can't come in heavy handed. You're coming in on their terms, their rules, and you don't know what those rules are. You don't know what those terms are. You don't know their expectations. So yeah, you want to put your best foot forward, but at the same time, it's like, can I step here? Okay. If I just respected, what they had done. And I just wanted to make sure that, I don't know, you're not going to come in and tell people what to think of you. They're going to think of you what they think of you.
Right. I want to talk about the Union Underground, because I grew up in San Antonio. The band was based out of San Antonio.
Do you see this? Is it backwards?
I see that. No.
It's perfect.
Keep San Antonio metal. Yeah. So being from San Antonio and being a fan of hard rock and metal and that sort of thing, you guys were our great hope. The Union Underground, signed to a major label, picking up some good tours. We were starting to see you in the magazines and stuff. You got you toured Ozfest. That was amazing. And you were the opening act for Marilyn Manson on a Manson tour when Manson was arguably the biggest name in the business at the time. So tell us a little bit about the rise, and then I think you've kind of already alluded to the fall of the Union Underground, but tell us a little bit about your time, because those are some pretty monumental achievements. Major label, Ozfest, and Manson. Tell us about Manson tour.
Like Jason pointed out, Jason did their showcases. So, they were already like on the path. And then by the time I got into the band, they were already signed to Columbia Records. They had done most of the records. So Brian and Patrick Kennison are the brainchild of the band. Especially Brian. He's a talented singer.
Brian Scott. Brian Scott.
Brian Scott, talented singer. He is a talented guitar player, even though he didn't play guitar live. That guy could wail just as much as Pat. And he really knew how to make sound work. So he had a little studio in like this small town outside of San Antonio, and he got killer tones out of that. And he really was a smart guy. He knew how to make it work. So he was creating this great record called the Union Underground. And it's funny because I remember Soak playing with Union Underground. We were headlining White Rabbit, but Union Underground was like second billing right underneath us. And I remember going over to their merch and being like, God damn, these guys got it together. They were always, everything was total pro. Their cassettes that they were selling, cassettes at the time, were like on like a display case with lighting underneath coming up. Their shirts were perfect. Everything was just like done perfectly.
Yeah.
They didn't do anything halfway. And so when I got into the band, they were already signed to Columbia Records. They said, hey man, the record's pretty much done, but we're doing a couple extra songs. Let's fly you out to LA. And so I ended up tracking 3 extra songs on the record. And one of the songs was Turn Me On, Mr. Deadman, which became a top 10 hit at rock radio. Another song was called South Texas Death Ride. Mm-hmm. And we did those songs with, at the time, an up and coming producer named Don Gilmore. Don Gilmore's project right after Union Underground was Linkin Park.
Yeah, because Linkin Park opened for you guys on a tour, right?
And then there's that connection as well. But we worked with Don Gilmore before he was with Linkin Park. So that was interesting. And we worked at SIR Studios, NRG Studios, which is a huge studio in LA. So Columbia Records they were getting hot producers on the record. They were, putting us in the best situation possible. And the band rose to the occasion. They were talented guys, man. So we put together what I think still considers a killer hard rock, heavy rock record. It's so good. And you listen to it to this day, tonally it stands up. It doesn't sound dated at all. There's a lot of great songs on it. So, we were on our way. We had John Kolodner, the infamous John Kolodner, who resurrected Aerosmith's career. Mm-hmm. We were actually on his imprint label called Portrait, which was a division of Columbia. So originally Portrait was supposed to be a label that was going to revive old band's career like he had done with Aerosmith. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, that was kind of lightning in a bottle, because when he tried it with other bands, it didn't really have the traction. So most of Portrait's, by the time Union Underground got along there, most of Portrait's funds went into us. And we had great radio promotion, and it just blew up. I remember like talking to some of the biggest and baddest at radio, biggest and baddest at booking. We're doing dinners in New York, dinners in LA. I mean, the band is like number one with a bullet. Great PR team, amazing ads in all the trades. And then on top of it, we're putting together a show with 2 screens. And as we play music, the screens like have this like imagery that goes along with the music. I mean, it was just so over the top.
Right.
It was a freaking freight train that was already going 100 miles per hour. You weren't going to stop it, So we just rolled right into a U.S. touring circuit. And here's how much money there used to be in the music industry. This will blow your mind. They booked us a headlining run across America when nobody knew who we were, and they offered the show for $1. And so the clubs agreed to do the gig because Portrait paid for whatever money was missing. They were basically like, we're going to buy out your venue on a Friday night. What does it cost? Okay. Now we want you to sell the ticket for $1.
Oh,
What?
wow.
Talk about promotion. You know what I mean? Like, it was just all hands on deck, every idea we could do, all the money we could put into it. So it was just amazing. Great tour. So we're doing these shows for $1. Radio stations going all over it. They're like, new band out of Columbia Records. They're playing this Friday for $1. You can't miss that. And so people would show up and boom, fans for life. And we just hammered it. And then the hype keeps going. Radio single goes up. We get the Ozfest tour. We started in Milton Keynes, which is in London. So they flew us to London. We did the Milton Keynes show, did a couple shows in Europe, which is my first time flying over there. And then we come back to the US. We did the entire US run at 2001 Ozfest, which coincidentally Disturbed was on it as well. And, a lot of great bands were on it. Mudvayne. I mean, it's just, I met so many great people and really got, Soak was kind of an alternative band. Now I'm like really in my element. It's like rock and metal and festivals and fucking awesomeness. Yeah. And the band just kept going up and going up. Then we get the Marilyn Manson gig, and it's hot, right? We're just shy of selling a gold record, and Columbia's like, all right, time for you guys to get back in the studio.
Sounds familiar.
Sounds familiar.
So we put together one song that ended up at it was called Raw. It was the theme for Raw for wrestling. Mm-hmm. It wasn't supposed to be the theme. We wrote it for somebody else, but they liked the song so much that it became like the theme for the Raw TV show for like 10 years. It was crazy. Wow. So, and in the video, like when you watch the beginning of it, it's like, you get the guns, the drugs. They did a video for us. We're like rocking out inside of a wrestling ring, the whole thing, man. I mean, it's just like total ascension, new record. Okay. Nothing's happening. A year goes by, hardly anything. And I'm not a primary songwriter. That's Brian Scott. And he is a perfectionist. And what happens with perfectionists is they don't do well with deadlines and timelines, and they procrastinate. And then by the time he put together 2 or 3 songs that were good, the label's like starting to lose interest. They're spending a lot of money keeping Brian in the studio, while the rest of us, now I'm back home in Austin. I got to have a day job because we've stopped the momentum.
Yeah.
Months are going by. I'm like, shit, man. Brian, what's going on? Oh, it's still putting it together. When it's time, I'll fly you out. There's just a lot of that, man.
Yeah.
Finally, they stuck us into a studio with, I can't remember the producer, Scott. He's a keyboard player on the Metallica's. You see him in the making of Metallica's Black Album. He does all the strings for Unforgiven and stuff like that. Scott, I can't remember his last name, but he also produced Rob Zombie's solo records, his first couple solo records, Dragula.
Scott Humphrey.
Scott Humphrey. That's who it is. I knew you knew who it was. Yeah. So we're working with Scott Humphrey at his LA studio, which is totally pimp. But we're still just like, there's no magic, man. There's no vibe at all. Everything's just a slugfest. There's an attitude in the band. There is negativity. There's egos. There's rock star shit. I just don't roll like that. It was very difficult. Like, I'm trying to like heal wounds here. I'm trying to like, come on, guys, let's get, I'm the cheerleader, And then, I'm looking like I don't know, like a sad jerk because they're big rock stars. And I've already been to the dance a few times. This is like, I've already been to a label a few times. I've been dropped. We don't want this to happen to us. Trust me. Sure enough, while we were working on the record with Scott, Columbia Records finally goes, yeah, we're done paying for you. We're done.
Oh, man.
Record's over.
Yeah.
You guys aren't turning around a product. Too much time went by.
Yeah.
And that's it, man.
Do you think that sometimes you, when I say you, I don't mean you, I mean just anyone, can easily forget that it can be like that. Just say, yeah, we're done. Just pull the plug, and maybe that is an ego that you forget that it's fleeting moments. This could be over. We could be writing what we think is the greatest fucking rock song in the world, and someone could just knock on the door and go, yeah, you guys need to move out. We're done, and get evicted, dropped, whatever you want to call it.
Absolutely. And
I think
also,
they just forget.
You have to, we're a baby band still. We can't waste people's time. 2 years can't go by with no product.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
It's just, no one's going to care anymore. And the way the labels work, there's a lot of musical chairs at the labels. So whoever was championing you, whatever team that used to be there at Columbia is now fractured. That half the team's there now.
Yeah.
And the new half of the team has got their own favorite bands that they brought in. No, you don't need that Union Underground band anymore. Why are we putting money in them, man? I got this new band over here who are hot and they got the record out right now.
Yeah.
And, you got to keep going. Just it's a long way to the top, but when you're at the top, you got to fight harder than ever because everybody wants to be there. And I'm not saying we're at the top, but even just in the climb, you can never stop pushing. You can't ever stop. And Union Underground stopped basically. Yeah. I don't blame the label for getting rid of us. I was like, fuck, I'm surprised they kept us on as long as they did.
Right.
Yeah. We should mention that the album we're talking about is called An Education in Rebellion.
Education in Rebellion. Yeah. I love that record too. I'm really proud of that record. It turned out great. And I love touring it. And it was fun, but
you mentioned something in the conversation about that album that you kind of came in halfway through or something. So who played bass on the tracks that you didn't play on?
Patrick and Brian, between the two of them.
So it's still done within the band then. Okay.
Yeah. Those guys were really good players. And then I came in and kind of did my own little thing.
Tell us about quickly about the Manson tour, and then I want to move on to some of your other stuff. But the Manson tour, I mean, if you're in a rock band in the early 2000s or something, and that was the ticket to be a part of, and it's Manson, so it's got to be surrounded by insanity. So tell us a little bit about, from your perspective, how that tour was.
Well, we were playing big theaters. So like, if you're familiar, like Eagles Ballroom, in Milwaukee and these are pretty big rooms, the Tabernacle in Atlanta. So decent rooms. They're all sold out. And it was only I think we were only on the tour for 3 weeks, but it freaking felt like 3 months. Just like every night was an adventure. There's always something crazy going on. And every day he's being picketed by Christians against, whatever. And he just would love it. He would sit there and scream at him outside his bus. And it was just adding to his whole thing. He really embraced that, riling people up and sort of being counterculture, and it worked for him. So I'm looking and I'm saying well, the more people, there's a correlation here. The more people that are picketing outside his show, the more people that are showing up with tickets inside.
Right. Exactly.
I'm this guy's doing something right. Godhead was the opening act. Get to know those guys really well. And then I ended up, befriending Manson. I ended up on his bus a couple times, hanging out with the band. It was Pogo, Twiggy, John 5, I think, was in the band right then. And it was the Guns, Gods, and Government tour. And it was great, man. Had a great time with them. They were personable, but he was definitely, he has a regalness about him, especially back then. He'd walk into the room and he was very cool, and you respect him, and for all his craziness, the Manson camp was run really well. Everything was perfect.
Yeah.
And then we were watching them. We're like, this is the way you run if we ever get to this level, this is the way you run it. The crew always on point. Everybody was just great. Our last show was in New York at, I'm trying to remember the name of the theater, big place. And Lars shows up. So that was my first time meeting Lars. Lars is backstage, and Manson was dating Rose McGowan at the time. So it's Rose McGowan, Manson, Lars, me, Patrick, and a couple other people. And we were just partying backstage, having a good time. And then we ended up going to some after party afterward. And then I ended up hanging out with Lars at the end of the night. It was just, it was wild. It was it was rock stardom, but big time rock stardom.
Yeah. That's why I asked, because it sounds, I remember that tour and I thought, there is no bigger tour right now in that genre of music, and you're sort of in the eye of the storm. So
yeah, that's exactly it, in the eye of the storm. Just taking notes, enjoying the ride, being appreciative of every day.
Did you learn anything not to do?
I probably did everything wrong at some point.
I
When
feel
I was
like
younger
you're,
back then, I bounced back quicker. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
there
feel
was
like you're,
definitely no shortage of Jaeger. There wasn't a night that went by that we didn't drink ourselves, into oblivion. But somehow we were able to get up the next day and still rock and still, keep it going. But
that young factor is the
Power
reason
of
why
youth.
you were able to
that
bounce
helps.
back. Yeah.
Yeah.
That
I
helps.
feel like your time maybe with Union Underground and the mingling and the learn and the lesson and the people and the rise of Union Underground and the people that you were at the Ozfest, the people you met on Ozfest, Disturbed you met on Ozfest, the
Yeah.
connections that you made while you were in Union Underground. Do you feel like? I mean, I feel like I already know the answer to the question. I just feel like those connections are what ultimately, even though you're a respectable man, you did everything, with passion and correct, and as I said, used your resources to where you are now in your almost 20-year run with Disturbed. I feel like your time with Union Underground and that ladder or the stepping stones and things like that, and I feel like you did a lot of things right in that your time with Union Underground, and that sort of like people recalled that it sort of like helped you get the gig.
I don't know. I like to think I left a good impression.
That's what I'm trying to say.
I would rather be, the nice guy that didn't get the gig than the dick that did.
Yeah.
And I definitely, when I did that final audition for Disturbed, one of the dudes who kind of thought he had the gig was a real jerk. I remember trying to meet him and talk to him. He's like, turned around away from me. And I'm like, all right, well, I guess you're going to be that guy. I'm not,
Yeah.
I'm in this, to enjoy myself and I have some lifelong friends from that. Me and the Drowning Pool guys, I'm still lifelong friends with. And people who I met from that era, Lacuna Coil and whatever. They remember me from Union, and obviously I've solidified those friendships even more so in Disturbed. But I'm still that same guy. I'm a cheerleader. I want us all to win. I'm not like we're better than them, and or why are they blowing up and we aren't? That's a big thing that I saw. Was Papa Roach would blow up and then my band would be like, what the hell? And I'm like, dude, we're all on our own fucking journey. Just chill out, like it comes when it comes. Just do our thing here. Like, do you really want Carson Daly on stage with you? Like, it's okay. You remember that Papa Roach was blowing up so big, they were on TRL, and I'm like, well, we don't really need to go there, guys. Like, let's just do our own thing. But I never, that's a thing musicians do. They compare themselves to other people on any level. Mm-hmm. And they get bitter over it. That's just not in me. Yeah. I'm like, let's all win. Let's all make this work. I maybe can learn from another band. Like, well, why are they doing better than us? Okay. Take notes. Don't complain.
Yeah. Yeah. One more side note on Ozfest. Do you remember a band that was also on that Ozfest tour that year called Pure Rubbish?
Oh yeah, I used to hang out with those kids all the time. Drummer's name was Nick, I believe.
Evan.
What?
Evan.
Evan was the drummer. What was the singer guitar player?
Derek.
Yes.
Derek and Evan Donovan. They were brothers.
The brothers. I would hang out with them a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I think
so talented.
They were amazing. I thought they were going to really go far because, but we've all heard this story before. A band has all the ingredients and the industry doesn't cooperate or whatever. But those kids were amazing.
They were so young, but they didn't, when you hung out with them, you didn't feel like they were young. they had like old souls.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Well, like not just their talent, their musicality, but even like in the way they presented themselves and they spoke and the way they handled themselves. I was just like, there's no way you guys are teenagers.
Yeah.
We thought they were going to hit, but
Yeah. They had the backing of Sharon Osbourne and, they were from Houston. So when my wife and I, before we were married, she lived in the Houston area. So we had this long distance relationship and I'd go to visit her in Houston and I'd befriended the guys somewhere along the line. So then we would go to their rehearsal space and hang out. And then we would go to their shows. And then we were really proud of them when they got the Ozfest thing. And then we saw them as the backing band for Kelly Osbourne on the MTV Movie Awards. She did a Madonna song, and Pure Rubbish was the backing band. We couldn't believe we're watching them on TV. But yeah, they were like teenagers. I think Evan was like 14 at the time.
Yeah.
But they were old souls. Their dad was sort of a punk rocker. So those kids were growing up on Hanoi Rocks and the Dead Boys and the Stooges and stuff like that. So
they knew every single GNR lick too.
Oh yeah. And really talented kids. But yeah, when I went to see that Ozfest in San Antonio, I was pretty friendly with Patrick Kennison at the time, more so than you at the time. And I was looking for him. I think he either hooked me up with some passes or something. And he said, "Hey, I'm hanging out with the Pure Rubbish guys." And I was like, "Oh, killer. I know those guys." So we all kind of had a little bit of a reunion there in San Antonio at the Ozfest.
Yeah, Union Underground was pretty tight with those kids, actually. We let them on our bus and, hang out with them. Took them under our wing a little bit. They were cool.
Yeah.
Do remember them well.
Let me jump around here. I want to.
They say bands are here today, gone later today.
Exactly. Well, I do stay in touch with them from time to time, and I do know that they're doing very well, especially the brothers. They're still in the music business. They're a little more behind the scenes now, but still very active in the music business. So, obviously wish them continued success. I wanted to ask you, there's a couple other things that I wanted to touch on. Your career has crossed paths with some other really interesting people. Art of Anarchy. Tell us a little bit about that band, because there was a time Scott Weiland from Stone Temple was the singer. And that kind of fell apart or something.
So in 2011, Disturbed took a extended hiatus. Okay. We were just like, we're taking a break. And so it was like, all right, what am I going to do now? So it was kind of like license for me to I don't know, join some other bands, see what else is out there. So I did Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp, and I started doing these other things, and word kind of starts getting out about me. And I did a couple different side projects. One of them was the band Art of Anarchy. So there's these two brothers out of Long Island, twin brothers, guitar player and drummer, and they had been working with Thal Bumblefoot from Guns N' Roses. Later on Guns N' Roses. And obviously, if you know anything about Ron, he's a shredder. That guy is
virtuoso.
Freaking mind-blowing. Yeah. And he has perfect pitch, and he's the sweetest, coolest dude in the world. And he's a hell of a producer too. So he's been producing music with these guys. So they got together a pretty good grouping of material for this record. And the brothers had some backing, so that, they had money. And so they reached out to Scott Weiland. I guess Scott wasn't doing anything, and they convinced Scott Weiland to sing on the record. And then they reached out to me. I mean, they go, "Hey man, we're this band out of Long Island. We got Thal Bumblefoot playing and producing for us, and we got Scott Weiland singing. Would you like to play bass?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's a no-brainer."
Right.
So I flew out, met the guys in person, played all over the record. Weiland sang on it, but Weiland sang on it in his studio with his producer in LA. Okay. There was never really any interaction during the making of the record.
Okay.
So we're trying to put together, a label deal and all this. We get a deal, and they're thinking, "Oh, this is going to be a super group. This is going to be easy money. We'll get these guys on the road, whatever." Well, Weiland's head wasn't in it. He, for some reason, thought he could sing on a record and not tour it, or he could sing in a band and not be in the band. But it doesn't really work when you're on his level. No, that's your band now. That's, So he even did. So I only met him once. We did videos. So we had 2 video shoots that we did over a 3 or 4 day period in LA. And that was the only time I really had any interaction with him. And even that was very limited. But the record that we did is really good. And it was Scott Weiland's last performance before he died, last performance on record before he died. And although he wasn't the lion that he used to be, when you listen to Dead and Bloated and, some of those early STP records where he was just powerful. He wasn't powerful, but he was soulful, and he was beautiful, and he was deep. I don't know how to describe it. It was I know this is a stretch maybe for some of our listeners. So Billie Holiday, during her later years, she had a bad heroin addiction.
Mm-hmm.
And you could hear it in her voice, this loneliness, this soulfulness. And I'm not recommending people do heroin, but what I am saying is some artists who have that, who are on it and perform on it, there is like a quality to their voice that is indescribable. And that's what I heard in Weiland's voice on our last record. He had this, you could tell it was going to be his last record. It was like his swan song, and it was so powerful. It's a really good record. Highly recommended. Art of Anarchy's first record. We had great artwork on it. The whole thing was great. We had, we had support labeling, but the Scott Weiland didn't want to do it. So that kind of kills it, right?
Yeah. What's the title of that album? Is it
It's just self-titled? That one's just self-titled. And then for some reason we decided to do it again with another Scott. We did it with Scott Stapp from Creed.
Right. Okay.
On this record, I did a lot more writing. The record's called The Madness. That was a tough record to make. A lot of like just sitting in the jam room with Scott Stapp and Bumble and the whole band, and just trying to get everybody on the same page, and trying to, I was in a super creative zone at that point. So I brought in a ton of songs. I probably wrote half that record. And, it was good. It was difficult working with Stapp because he's, you just don't know which Stapp you're going to get. Like some days you're going to get creative Stapp, and some days you're going to get the Stapp who just wants to sit in the corner and say everything sucks. So, he was kind of moody. And, he was only into it so much. It was very frustrating. It was like dragging an elephant uphill, sometimes. So it was, I don't mind saying this, because it turned into an entire shit show. He was supposed to do, we signed to a label again. We were supposed to do, I think he was promised to do 90 shows with us. He did 6 and then bailed. So, wow. And that was all in the contract. Like I can talk about this because it's already, it's, I'm not going to put out too much, but we are in a dispute with him legally. And, that's already been around. So, I'm not like letting the cat out of the bag or saying anything that hadn't been already told in the press years ago. It's been years, but we're getting to the end of that dispute. It's frustrating because when you get into a band, you trust people. It's I want to say it's like a marriage, but it's a relationship.
Yeah.
And, when somebody's in that relationship and they're not being truthful, and they're there under false reasons, and they're already planning an exit plan when you're buying the house and they're trying to figure out a way to ditch you. It hurts. So I'm a trusting person. I'm not going to say I'm naive, but I refuse to get hardened. The music industry will break your heart. There's a reason that Sims Foundation exists, because it is not a mentally friendly industry. But I'm not going to allow that to happen to me. I'm not going to allow myself to get hardened by things. So like, even though the thing with Scott Weiland didn't work out, even though Disturbed was on hiatus, even though I had dealt with the losses in Union Underground, a lot of heartbreak, I was still like, all right, Scott Stapp, let's go, fresh and as a daisy and willing to do it, even though he didn't have a great history coming into the camp. He'd just come off of his whole thing where he was traveling across the country in the back of a truck, homeless. And he's telling us all these stories, and he's just back sober. So we're his sober camp. We're supporting him. There is no drinking. What do you need, Scott Stapp, to make this work? All hands on deck. We believe in you. We want you to be a part of this. You're going to agree to this? Awesome. Yeah. And then and then you put all that into somebody and they turn their back on you. I don't really have a lot of remorse for that. It really hurt my feelings. I want to say my feelings. It hurt my soul because I put a lot into that record. And he had no intention of touring it. And it's come out now, like so much has come out in the wash that I'm just like, I just can't believe the things that were said that weren't true. So there's that story. Yeah. I bring it up. I'm going to get in trouble for this. Some lawyer's going to call me and be like, you can't bash, blah, 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 blah.
I don't think he bashed anybody.
I'm just telling the truth, man. It just sucked. Promises were made, they weren't kept, and I wouldn't do that to you. I wouldn't do that to you, Jason. I wouldn't do that to you, David. I wouldn't do that to anybody. And how people can go through life and do that and think it's okay because somebody is the worst kind of rock star ego I can imagine. Yeah. Well, if there's anything we've learned about you in this conversation, it's that you have a history of learning from adversity. So
These
Unfortunately.
Yeah, well, you could say unfortunately, but I think even you would look in the mirror and say, I took something valuable away from those experiences, even if I learned what not to do and how not to behave, and that'll serve you well going forward.
I appreciate that.
Another project I wanted to talk about, because again, you've worked with some pretty amazing people, and that's Adrenaline Mob. You'd worked with Mike Portnoy in that band. And then after Portnoy steps aside, in comes AJ Pero from Twisted Sister. So two great drummers that you got to work with. Tell us a little bit about Adrenaline Mob.
Adrenaline Mob is like Led Zeppelin virtuoso. Those guys were outrageous. So for years, I'm playing in bands where we're playing to a click. I'm a machine, Union Underground, Disturbed. It's like do. Adrenaline Mob was the band I got into actually right after Disturbed took our hiatus. That was the first band. Okay. So Portnoy knew of me because Avenged Sevenfold had toured with Disturbed on one of the fests that were going around at the time. I forgot which one. And so me and Portnoy had become friends. And when they needed a bass player, he was the one who recommended me. He reached out to me. And so I show up, and so I don't know if you know Russell Allen. Well, I know you know Russell Allen from Symphony X. He's the singer. Russell Allen is 6'4" of the most beautiful voice you've ever heard in your life. That guy could sing the phone book. It's fucking incredible.
I agree.
And he pitches perfect, and he never has to warm up. He's just the most gifted singer I've ever met in my life. It's fucking incredible. And the guitar player's name's Mike Orlando. Mike Orlando was a total shredder. Like, one of those guys is like goes to NAMM every year and has all the endorsements, but you don't know who he is because he hasn't had his breakthrough band yet. But he's that guy. He knows all the scales. He knows all the riffs. He can play anything. Just another virtuoso, right? And then Mike Portnoy, we don't even need to talk about him. Dream Theater, 12 years in a row voted best progressive drummer on the planet. Yeah. So you're talking like three really... When we talked about musicians that are really great but not famous, now we're talking about like three great musicians who are like semi-famous, well, especially Portnoy, but making it happen. And they wrote, a great record. So, and they brought me in. I came in. The first record I did not play on, but we toured it. And then AJ Pero comes in, and then we did a cover record called Coverta. I did that with Mike Portnoy. And then the third record, I did with AJ Pero, and I, played bass on that one. So I did 3 records with Adrenaline Mob, and we toured Europe, we toured South America. We were there, we were doing it. It was happening.
Yeah.
Great players. Here's what I wanted to get to though. It changed the way I played bass. So for years, I'm a very specific player. Like once I learned how to play a part, I played the same way every time. That's not what these guys do. They play the essence of the song. Every night's a different performance. It was wild. I'm chasing Mike Portnoy, trying to get him and I to lock in on some kind of like groove thing. And it's just not happening because he plays it differently every night. And I'm looking at Mike Orlando and I'm like, what's the riff you play at the end of this? Bro, I don't know. Blah, 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 blah. And I'm looking at Russell Allen. Russell sings different melodies every night, whatever he feels. They're just like so good that they don't have to like, there's no muscle memory. They just do it. It comes from their head and their heart, not their fingers. It's fucking wild. So it took a while for me to like find my groove with those guys. And I finally did. And it's crazy how it clicked. I'm chasing Mike on drums. It's not working. I just could feel it. It's just like they had no problem with it. They thought it was all good. But for me, I was like, no, we're not glued together like we need to be.
So you were in a jazz band.
I was in a jazz band. So one day the monitor guy goes, okay, you want kick in your monitor? No. You want guitar in your monitor? No.
Wow.
He goes, what do you want in your monitor? I go, you know what? I don't want anything. And I just played the song and ignored the band. Know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I just played the way I want the song to sound from bass instead of trying to like work with them. I swear to God, that's the day we became a band. It was like all of a sudden I was the foundation and they were playing around me. I was the consistent. I was and I always had impeccable tempo. That wasn't a big deal from playing to a click for so many years. So, Mike could go off on some fill. He could go off, even try to lose me. It would never happen because I know my tempo. you know? So whenever Mike would start going off on one of his crazy fills, I just tap my foot, I'd stay in the groove, and he'd land that thing, bam. And I'm like, we're a band. This is it. I cracked the fucking code. I have to ignore you guys, and now we're great. But it worked because those guys needed, you can't all be soloing all the time. You know, you need somebody who's, you know, to solo too, you know, and that ended up being me. And I was sort of the consistent guy playing the song with the consistent riffs. And they were the ones that were like working all over. And we became a great band. You know, I remember when it happened. Very interesting story. And like we would do breakdowns, like middle of the song. I never knew when it's coming. My first gig with these guys in New York, they're like, "Oh, break it down. We introduced the band. All right, we're playing. Oh, we got Michael Lando on guitar. Okay, cool. And then Mike Portnoy. We got John Moyer over here. Give us a lick, John." And I'm like, you know, blah, blah, blah. No, come on, man. I'm like, no, it's cool. He's like, "No, you're going to solo into the microphone." I'm like, fuck me, okay? Totally like, just walking a high wire every night. I remember Mike's playing along and he stops the drums and I stop. And Mike says in the microphone, "No, keep going, John." "Oh, okay, I'll just keep going." Dude, those guys are so amazing. And I learned so much from them. My tone got better. My playing got better. I changed my gear. I use Spectres now because of them. I mean, those guys made me such a much better player. And then when Union Underground got back together after my time with Art of Anarchy, my time with Adrenaline Mob, my time playing with Jeff Tate, when Disturbed got back together after our hiatus, I was a monster. I'm coming in just like, you know, I never stopped. You know, those guys kind of took breaks, and David did his side project and Dan did his side project, but none of them were working as hard as I was, or with as many different bands, as many different influences. And I just picked it all up like a sponge. So, you know, that little hiatus, that little 4-year hiatus we took, it was a huge thing for me as a musician. I think it's important to play with other people. You know, that you get really good when you get those other influences. Unfortunately, most bands don't get to do that because, like I said earlier, when you're in a band, it's like your gang. You know, you don't really stray. You know, like Metallica said, you know, we're a fist. We don't do side projects. You know, this is us. And I respect that mentality. But unfortunately, as a musician, you can lose opportunities to really learn unless you're jamming with other people.
Yeah. You mentioned Jeff Tate, and I wanted to ask about that as well, because you played, I guess he was billing himself as Operation Mindcrime at the time.
Yeah. I joined Tate when he was, so there was a time when there were 2 Queensryches. So they split. Jeff had his Queensryche, and I joined the Scab Queensryche crew with Jeff. And then there was the other Queensryche that had all the other members and Todd Latour. And the judge who was in charge of it in Washington State was like, "Well, I'm not going to award either one of you guys the name Queensryche. We're just going to let this go on for a year. Next year, he said, you guys can both tour under the name Queensryche. In a year, we'll see who's still standing and who's, you know, proven themselves to be the real Queensryche." Fucking ballsy thing for a judge to do.
Yeah,
I know. So both bands like had a mission. We got to be the better Queensryche. So Jeff put together a killer band. And Rudy Sarza was in that band. And then Rudy couldn't do some gigs. So Rudy called me up because I had done Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp. So Rudy had seen me play and trusted me. So I came in and filled in for Rudy for a little bit. And then Rudy slowly stepped out. And then I became the player, you know, that Jeff was calling on more often than not. And then eventually they came to the agreement that there was not going to be 2 Queensryches. They got awarded, the other camp got awarded the Queensryche name. And then Jeff got awarded all rights to Operation Mindcrime, the record, the name, and any artwork associated with that. And that's kind of where the split happened. So then I became sort of a member of Operation Mindcrime, and I did 3 records with him. It was over one session. Like we did like 24 songs over a week, and that ended up being 3 records for Jeff.
Wow.
And I toured with them and did all that. It was a lot of fun. I did Europe with those guys and toured the States, and Jeff and I are still great friends.
So what was it like working with Jeff? Because for me, in my mind, he's one of the premier vocalists of my youth. When I was a teenager, I've told this story before on the show where, you know, just when you thought nobody could give any competition to Rob Halford and Bruce Dickinson, here comes this Jeff Tate from Queensryche, and you're running around high school going, "Oh my God, there's somebody that can compete with Rob Halford and Bruce Dickinson." You never thought that was going to be possible. And now it's been done, you know, a number of times by other people. But to me, Jeff is one of those quintessential voices. And the songs that he did with Queensryche, I mean, you got to play them every night. What was that like for you playing those songs and working with Jeff as a person?
So when Empire came out, that record, I was in high school. That was a big record for me. I remember going and seeing Queensryche when I was, 16 years old in concert. And they did all of Operation Mindcrime, and then they did.
Was this in El Paso?
In El Paso, Texas, yeah. So, yeah, I was definitely a fan. I didn't know Jeff, so when he reached out to me, Rudy Sarzo didn't give me a heads up. I literally get a text message from its unknown Seattle number, and it's like, "Hey, John, this is Jeff Tate. Just want to know if you're free in May. I could use you for some gigs." I was like, "What? This is real?" I call him up. He's so classy. He's so kind. He's a thoughtful human being. Whatever stories that, may have gone around about him or whatever, I don't know any of that, Jeff. I know the Jeff who's just really like a good dude. And he's very, a guy like that gets into his position because he's pushing boundaries and he's doing stuff that nobody else is doing. And then once the band, in my opinion, once the band had hit that pinnacle with Empire, his mentality never changed. He kept pushing boundaries. And I think there was part of that. He kind of left his audience behind a little bit on later records because he was still in that head zone of pushing, because that's what got him to where he was at. Yeah. And he was just, he was so, he was pushing those boundaries so much, he, kind of like left his audience behind a little bit. I think that's kind of what happened, except for the hardcore audience, and he still has his fans, his lifelong fans that will always be there for him. But you can see, when you look at Queensryche records, that was their peak, was Empire. And then, they never really had any strong follow-ups afterward. Right. But that's because he's a visionary. That's just who he is. And when I started working with him, I remember I was trying to write some songs for the record. I'm kind of like leaning on Operation Mindcrime. I'm leaning on Queensryche as direction. Mm-hmm. And he's not interested in any of that. He's like, nah, been there, done that.
Yeah.
Oh, I get it. You're not rehashing. You're just, everything has to be new for you. You just want to do something new. And here's another thing with him. Every day he wakes up and he sings. First thing in the morning, like when you're on the bus, you always know when you're on Jeff Tate's bus, because first thing in the morning, just hear him walking through, the bunk alley. And then you go out front to get coffee. He's like, "Hello, John, would you like some coffee?" He sings all day long. It's great. And he hates days off. The guy's a warrior. He hates days off. He wants to perform every single night. And that's how he keeps fresh. He just sings all day long. He's a really unique, cool dude and an incredible talent.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Wow. You've really had some amazing opportunities come your way. And I've loved picking your brain and hearing about all this stuff.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
It's fun to talk about it. I'm liking going down memory lane here. It's been fun.
Yeah. And I can tell your enthusiasm comes through. And I think that's what makes, that's what makes it so interesting, is I can tell that you genuinely appreciate all the opportunities you've earned and been afforded, because when you tell the stories, the little kid excitement still comes out of you. So
yeah, we could do a whole other podcast next time just about Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp. I got stories for days on that camp. It's so good, because that's where you get like all kinds of different rock stars that come in, and every one of them, there's always some unique thing that happens.
Yeah, we should do that. Because again, you've crossed paths with so many people that we're all familiar with, and we appreciate their work, and you've got some unique insight. So maybe we'll do that.
Yep.
Jason, you got anything else for John today?
No, I've just enjoyed you guys. The questions that you have for John were awesome, and actually, I didn't even know about the Art of Anarchy. I learned a lot. Not to say that that you and I don't have history with John, because we do. But the cool thing about Mr. Moyer is from the day that I met him, he hadn't changed. There's nothing different about John at all. There's nothing. Thanks, I can't say anything has changed from 2001, 2000. When did you get to, when did Soak start playing out?
97.
Because I didn't know you
97.
before that. I didn't know you before that.
No, soaks the time. So it would have been 97, 98 that you and I first met.
Right.
I do the same thing. I mark times in my life according to what band I was in and what tour I was on. You know? Like, how long have we known each other? Well, I was in this band at the time, and it was this summer, so it must have been this tour. Oh yeah, and then you can come down to like the day. You're like, wait a minute, it was in Detroit, and you go into your old calendar or something. You're like, oh yeah, you're like, it was June 21st, the day we met, because our lives are like dictated like that.
Yeah, but however that you don't lose your mind, if that's the way that you do it, that's fine. Whatever it is, those call it a milestone, whatever it is, those little things like an anniversary. Yeah. Whatever it is for you to not forget an anniversary, so you don't get in trouble with anyone. is you specify. You can put everything, put a timeline or it's like tying a string to a tree so you don't get lost. It's the way that I kind of.
Oh yeah, I got a lot of strings that are tied to a lot of trees out there.
Yeah, me too.
All forest of them.
Yeah, I remember the first time I met John. We didn't actually meet. Somebody pointed him out across the room at a club in Austin on 6th Street. I think it was Babes, and I was with the guys in 50 Mission Crush.
Oh, I love those guys.
Yeah, and they said, "Do you know John Moyer? He plays in this band Soak." And I was like, I don't think so. And they pointed you out, and of course you stood out, but that's the first time I remember laying eyes on you. And I was going to say, back to Jason's point, even back then you had the sideburns and the hair that you have today. So that hasn't changed either.
Yeah, it turned into more of a beard now, but yeah.
So what's with the hair? How long have you had the hair braided?
The dreads,
is that what you call it?
Dreads, since 97.
Okay, so I've never known you with anything but. So yeah. Well, that's your
my hair. I mean, if I let it go, it probably look like Jason's. It'd be more blonde. This is artificial intelligence right here.
Oh, all right. Dreadlock. You just made me think of like Predator or some shit.
Yeah.
They have dreads too. Yeah,
they do.
Well, John, thank you so much for joining us today.
This is fun, man. Thank you guys so much. This is awesome. I'm down to do this anytime you guys want. And, this is great. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing your stories. Thanks for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, our special guest today on the Talk Louder podcast, John Moyer. And on behalf of my co-host, Jason McMaster, I'm Metal Dave Glessner signing off on the Talk Louder podcast.
Talk louder.